Get out of my sight now!
The sound came first, a sharp, clean, final. A crystal glass hit the marble floor and shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. The noise sliced through the music, through the laughter, through the safe rhythm of dinner conversation. It was the kind of silence that doesn't wait. It commands. Raymond Cross, the billionaire CEO at the head of the table, turned his head slowly. His voice followed like a knife through silk. "Do you even know what you're doing?" Every fork froze midair, every breath hid behind still lips. The air in the luxury restaurant turned cold, heavy, watching. Amara Lewis stood near his chair, her hands stiff at her sides. The glass had slipped when a guest's sleeve brushed her tray. Reflex caught part of it, not enough. A fine line of water spread across the tablecloth, running toward the edge like a clock counting down her dignity. "Incompetence," Cross said again, this time with a slow precision that made the words sting. His eyes didn't look at the glass. They stayed locked on her name tag, Amara L., as if that single letter defined her worth. No one spoke. The executives around him shifted in their seats, pretending to check their watches or menus. Their smiles had vanished. Some glanced at Amara, then looked away, as though watching shame might spread like a stain. She bent to gather the fragments. The glass had turned to glittering dust beneath her palm. Tiny slivers caught the light like stars trapped on the floor. She could feel their gaze like a weight on her shoulders. "Be careful," Cross said flatly, leaning back in his chair. "You've already proven fragile." A small forced laugh rose from one of the men beside him. Quick, nervous, wrong. Cross didn't laugh. He was testing her silence. Amara lifted the last piece of glass onto the tray. She felt its smooth edge, cold and clear, a mirror to everything he could not see. Her patience, her effort, her exhaustion. She had served quietly for weeks, every night standing until her feet ached, every morning studying online courses she couldn't afford to finish. She had learned how to survive this tone, this look, this moment. The restaurant lights gleamed across polished silver. The violinist in the corner slowed the music until it was only a breath. Somewhere behind her, a manager whispered orders to stay calm. The scent of citrus and candle wax hung in the air. It should have felt elegant. Instead, it smelled like control. Cross lifted his new glass, swirling the liquid with practiced indifference. "When people can't do simple tasks," he said to no one in particular, "it shows what kind of standards they come from." The line landed with weight. Nobody corrected him. Nobody needed to. His tone said what his words didn't, the unspoken division that had followed her all her life. Amara stood still, tray in hand, every breath measured. She looked at him, not in defiance but in truth. His face was confident, polished, used to being obeyed, but she saw something else behind it, a man who mistook cruelty for power. He waved his hand toward the floor. "Clean it up properly, then get someone qualified to take over." The room seemed to lean toward her, waiting for collapse, waiting for anger, waiting for anything but the quiet strength that rose in her chest. She exhaled, slow and steady, gathering what was left of her composure. The shards on the marble reflected her face in a dozen broken pieces, proud, tired, still standing. Her voice came soft, steady and whole. "Yes, sir." The words rippled through the silence, calm and clear, louder than his anger, sharper than the glass that had shattered. The silence stretched so long it became a sound of its own. Even the air seemed to stop moving, as if the restaurant itself refused to breathe. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above polished tables. The air conditioning hummed softly, steady and cold, like the heartbeat of a machine that didn't care who suffered beneath it. Every person in the room felt the chill, yet no one dared to move. Raymond Cross sat like a monument in the center of it all. Silver hair, gold cufflinks, the faint smirk of a man too used to obedience. His empire stretched across continents. His face had filled magazines. His voice echoed on trading floors. His signature could move markets. Tonight, that same voice had reduced a waitress to silence. Amara Lewis stood a few feet away, tray still in hand, her head slightly lowered, not in defeat but in discipline. Her eyes found a fixed point on the marble floor, the same floor she had polished countless nights before the guests arrived. The reflection staring back was her own, bent beneath the weight of someone else's ego. Across the room, the manager hesitated near the corner. His lips parted, then closed again. The man's fingers twitched against his order pad, torn between duty and fear. He knew Raymond Cross by reputation. He knew one wrong word could cost not only Amara's job, but his own. The guests tried to look busy. One woman adjusted her napkin 3 times. Another man scrolled his phone with hands that weren't steady. They could all feel what hung in the air, a quiet, heavy shame no one wanted to touch. The servers at the back of the room had gone still. A young busboy stared at Amara, confusion flickering behind his eyes. He had never seen dignity look so quiet. Raymond leaned back in his chair, swirling his drink slowly, watching her. "I run companies on precision," he said to the table, his tone calm now, colder. "If people can't handle a single glass, imagine them handling real responsibility." The words weren't for her. They were for the room, a speech disguised as humiliation. The executives nodded, pretending to agree, pretending they didn't see what was really happening. The hum of the air conditioning deepened. It filled the space like an invisible wall between the powerful and the powerless. Its steady rhythm seemed to echo his indifference, smooth, measured, mechanical. Amara stood still, every muscle tight, her mind fighting to stay calm. Her heart told her to speak. Her reason told her not to. In that moment, silence became her shield. She inhaled through her nose, slow and careful, grounding herself against the cold that crept under her skin. From the edge of her vision, she caught a glimpse of the kitchen door swinging open. Warm air and light spilled out for a brief second, a flash of humanity in a frozen room. The smell of baking bread mixed with perfume and candle wax, a small reminder that life existed beyond the marble and money. The manager finally took a step forward, forcing a thin smile. "Apologies, Mr. Cross," he said softly. "We'll make sure everything is handled properly." Cross didn't look at him. "It already has been," he replied, eyes still fixed on Amara. She nodded once, her face calm, her voice steady. "Thank you, sir." The words were simple, stripped of emotion, but they carried control. Then, from the far end of the room, a soft voice broke the ice. Another waiter, young, nervous, leaned closer as he passed her. His whisper barely reached her ear. "You don't deserve this," he said. For the first time that night, the air felt human again. The room, still cold, seemed to take one long, quiet breath. The name tag was small, plastic and ordinary, yet it carried her entire disguise. Amara L. The single letter after her name was meant to fit neatly on a uniform, not to hide a degree from Harvard. Every night before her shift, she clipped it on like armor. It rested just above her heart, a reminder that in this room, she was not Amara Lewis, scholar of human behavior and social justice. She was Amara L., the woman who refilled glasses and smiled when others looked away. She had learned to move like shadow, quiet, efficient, invisible. But the truth of who she was did not fade. It lived beneath the starch of her collar, beneath the tired skin around her eyes, beneath the silence she carried like a weight. During the day, her world was smaller, a one-bedroom apartment shared with her mother, who had suffered a stroke 2 years ago. The walls held framed certificates and faded photographs. One showed Amara in a black graduation gown, the Harvard seal behind her. Her mother's smile bright and proud. She had written a thesis about inequality and human dignity. Now she lived it every day, bills stacked on the counter. Medication costs rose faster than her tips. The job at Le Chateau Bleu wasn't a dream. It was survival. But it kept the lights on, and it kept her mother's nurse paid. She remembered the call from the restaurant's manager last year. "You're overqualified," he had said, hesitating. She'd laughed softly. "Then I'll overserve." Every evening she left her apartment at sunset, carrying 2 worlds in her bag, a uniform folded beside a worn sociology book she could never bring herself to throw away. By the time she reached the restaurant, she would stand a little taller, then bow a little lower. Service demanded both. In the bright dining hall, her name tag gleamed under the chandeliers. Guests glanced at it briefly, never asking what the L stood for. They didn't know that it once stood for Lewis, lecturer in training, before life had rewritten her plans. They didn't know the hours she spent caring for her mother, feeding her soup between shifts, whispering goodnight before running to catch the last train. She had studied power once, the structures that separated those who command from those who serve. Now she saw them in motion, table by table, voice by voice. Raymond Cross embodied what she had written about, how people mistake privilege for worth. Tonight his words had burned through her composure, yet something inside her refused to break. Humiliation could not erase knowledge. Poverty could not erase purpose. The kitchen buzzed around her now, orders shouted, steam rising, plates clattering. She walked through it like someone walking underwater, hearing only the echo of that word, incompetence. At the freezer door she stopped. Its metal surface shone like a mirror, fogged by cold breath. She saw her reflection, apron smudged, hands trembling slightly, name tag catching the light. For a moment she reached up and touched it. The plastic felt colder than steel. It wasn't shame she felt, it was clarity. The tag was her mask, the price of survival in a world that looked through her. Behind her, laughter returned to the dining room. The hum of the air vents carried faint music from the lobby. But here, in the still chill of the kitchen, Amara stood face to face with herself. Her lips barely moved as she whispered the truth aloud, not to anyone else, but to the woman in the reflection. He saw a servant, she said quietly, her eyes steady. Not a person. The laughter came first, loud, polished, empty. It rose from the billionaire's table like smoke, curling above the chandeliers and staining the air. Raymond Cross was in his element. The shattered glass was forgotten, or at least buried under the weight of his voice. He leaned back in his chair, confident, commanding, the way men do when they believe the world was built to applaud them. This, he said, gesturing toward the staff who moved quietly in the background, is why merit matters. You can't hand out positions based on pity. You earn your place through competence, not credentials, not some charity degree. The table erupted in laughter again. Investors, publicists, and journalists, all nodding like a well-trained chorus. Their smiles glittered under the golden light. They laughed because it was safer than silence. Amara stood a few steps away, her tray balanced, her expression calm. The sound of their laughter hit her like cold rain. She had spent years studying the very systems he mocked, the illusions of fairness wrapped in elegant words like meritocracy. Raymond's voice grew louder, animated by approval. Everyone wants to talk about opportunity these days, he said. But opportunity means nothing without ability. You either have it or you don't. He raised his glass, tilting it toward a young reporter at his side. Write that down, he said. It'll make a good headline. The reporter laughed nervously, pen trembling slightly above her notebook. Across the table, a PR agent added, Well said, sir. That's leadership, Raymond smirked, satisfied. His reflection shimmered in the silverware. A man surrounded by power, yet blinded by it. The restaurant itself seemed to listen. The walls caught the sound, amplifying it in waves. Plates gleamed like mirrors, candles danced with false warmth, and the marble floor gleamed under shoes that had never known dirt. He kept talking. About efficiency, productivity, hard work. Words like armor, meant to defend his privilege as proof of greatness. Some people think the world owes them equality, he went on. But life isn't a classroom. It's a market. The strong rise. The rest learn to serve. His hand motioned carelessly toward Amara, who had just replaced his wine glass. The irony went unnoticed by everyone but her. In that instant, the contrast stood sharp, his luxury built from her labor, his arrogance sustained by her silence. The same man who mocked education couldn't see that the woman beside him had worn Harvard crimson once, and still carried its dignity under a name tag. Amara kept her posture steady, every move deliberate. She had studied people like him, men who spoke of fairness while standing on ladders others built. His empire was not born from merit but inheritance. Companies passed down, contracts brokered in boardrooms before he learned to spell his own name. Yet he spoke of earning. A journalist asked, What about diversity programs, Mr. Cross? Do they not help balance the scales? Raymond chuckled. Balance, he said. The world doesn't need balance. Needs results. The table roared again. Forks clinked. Champagne flowed. The music swelled as if trying to drown the truth. At the edge of the table, a junior executive, new, nervous, eyes sharp, held his phone below the linen. The camera lens caught everything. The arrogance, the laughter, the words that would echo later. The hum of the air conditioning blended with the clink of silver, turning the moment into something cold, almost sterile. Amara placed the final dish gently before Raymond, her reflection rippling in the polished plate. He didn't look at her. He was too busy basking in the approval of men who feared him. But the junior executive did look, and pressed record. The laughter continued. Unaware it was being captured, arrogance trapped inside glass once again. The kitchen door swung open and silence broke into sound. Voices, clanging pans, the hiss of boiling water, all blending into a storm of whispers. Amara stepped inside, the heavy door closing behind her with a dull thud. On the other side, laughter still echoed, smooth, careless, gilded. Here it was sharper, more human. Steam clouded the air, curling around lights and faces, carried the scent of butter, onions, and quiet anger. The kitchen was alive, but tonight it felt tense, watchful, as though the walls themselves had seen too much. Near the stove, the head chef slammed a pan down, oil splattering in protest. "Unbelievable," he muttered, shaking his head. "People like her keep this place standing, and he talks like that." His voice dropped, but his words hung heavy in the air. A dishwasher nearby glanced nervously toward the door. "Shh, don't say that too loud. You'll lose your job," the chef scoffed. "If fairness costs a job, this place is already bankrupt." Amara didn't speak. Her hands were steady as she folded her towel, but her face was pale under the harsh kitchen light. The air conditioning's hum outside had been cold. Here the heat burned. Yet both kinds of air felt the same, suffocating. At the prep table, a young busboy held his phone half hidden under the counter. His fingers trembled as he hit record. He wasn't sure what he meant to capture. The murmurs, the anger, the truth. He only knew it mattered. Somewhere deep inside, he felt this night would not stay buried. "Did you see his face?" whispered a waitress beside him. Like she wasn't even a person, the chef looked up. "That man's empire runs on people like her. Quiet, smart, unseen." He stirred a pot furiously, the ladle hitting the rim like a drumbeat. You take them away, the whole illusion collapses. The steam rose higher, wrapping everything in a soft haze. It blurred the edges of faces and light, truth forming in fog, invisible but real. Within it, Amara stood still, listening. The voices seemed to swirl around her like a tide. For a moment, she let herself feel the weight of their words, anger mixed with respect. She had been silent all evening, holding herself together like a wall against a storm. But in that fog, her silence began to feel different. Not weakness, but control. The kitchen door opened again. The manager stepped in, wiping sweat from his brow. His eyes darted toward Amara. "Enough talking," he said, voice low but urgent. "He's a VIP. We can't afford another scene." The chef stiffened but said nothing. Dishes clattered louder now, as if pretending normalcy could erase truth. The busboy slipped his phone into his apron, heart pounding. Amara met the manager's eyes for a moment. She said nothing, only nodded once, calm and composed. Then she turned back to her station, the steam folding around her like a curtain. Outside, laughter rose again. Inside, the whispers quieted. But the truth had already taken shape in the fog. The dining room had quieted to a murmur, the kind of stillness that follows cruelty. Glasses clinked, forks shifted, but conversation stayed cautious. Everyone was pretending to forget what had happened. Everyone except Amara. She walked out from the kitchen, tray in hand, her steps measured, calm, unhurried. The hum of the air conditioning pressed against her ears like white noise. Her uniform was the same, her name tag still pinned, but something in her eyes had changed. Raymond Cross was laughing again, retelling a story about hard work and real talent. His table applauded politely, eager to move past the earlier embarrassment. He lifted a pen, signing the bill with his practiced flourish. The ink looped across the page, confident, careless. When Amara reached the table, her tone was even. "Excuse me, sir, your receipt." He didn't look at her as he reached for it. Habit, not gratitude. She placed the folded slip neatly before him, then set something else beside it. A small metal badge, worn at the edges but still shining under the chandelier. Crimson and silver letters caught the light. Harvard Alumni Association. The sound of it touching the table, a quiet click, cut through every other noise. Cross looked down, confused. What's this? Amara met his eyes, her voice steady but firm. You signed this for the wrong person. The words fell softly, yet they struck like thunder. The room froze. A waiter paused mid-step. The piano music faded into air. Even the candles seemed to hold their flame still. Cross blinked, as if trying to rewrite what he'd just heard. His hand hovered over the badge, hesitant to touch it. You? His voice faltered. You went to Harvard? Yes, she said. Sociology. Class of 2018. Her tone carried no anger, no pride, only truth. For a moment he said nothing. His reflection stared back at him in the silver platter beside his plate, face pale, composed but breaking. Around the table his guests avoided his eyes. The laughter that had filled the room minutes ago now felt like a distant echo. Foolish, hollow, gone. A journalist's phone lifted discreetly, recording the moment. Another guest adjusted her camera, pretending to check messages. Light flashed, faint but blinding. Amara didn't move. She stood straight, her posture calm and unshaken. Her uniform, once a mark of servitude, now looked almost ceremonial, a symbol of restraint against arrogance. Cross's hand trembled slightly as he picked up the badge. Its cool metal pressed against his fingers like guilt made tangible. Why are you working here? He asked quietly, almost pleading. She looked at him, not with bitterness but with understanding deeper than pity. Because life doesn't always reward merit, Mr. Cross. Some of us work twice as hard to earn half as much. But that doesn't make us any less capable. Her words landed gently, but their truth weighed heavy. He opened his mouth to reply, but found none. Around them, the room had become an audience. The waiters, the guests, the managers, everyone watching the empire of ego collapse under a single sentence of dignity. The badge gleamed between them, separating power from worth. Cross lowered his eyes. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was judgment. Amara nodded once, collected the empty glasses from the table, and turned away. As she walked toward the kitchen, the first camera flash went off, then another. The light burst across the crystal walls, reflecting in sharp, endless fragments. Behind her, Raymond Cross sat frozen, the badge still in his hand. His whisper barely audible above the hum of the air. You went to Harvard? The first flash came like lightning, quick, blinding, unforgiving. Then silence. Not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that strips everything bare. Raymond Cross sat frozen, his hand still clutching the Harvard badge. Around him, the echo of his own laughter, the laughter of minutes ago, felt like a ghost circling the room. The same executives who had chuckled at his jokes now stared at their plates. Their silver cutlery shimmered, untouched. The air conditioning hummed softly, its rhythm steady while human dignity unraveled in real time. Cameras from nearby tables captured it all. The billionaire, the waitress, the truth he couldn't bury. Amara stood tall, calm, steady as stone. Her silence filled the space where power once lived. Miss, Cross began, his voice thin and uncertain. That wasn't my intention. The word stumbled out, clumsy and pale. He tried to smile, but it cracked halfway. It was a misunderstanding, he added louder this time, seeking rescue from the crowd. None came. The journalists didn't look up. Their phones were steady, screens glowing in judgment. The investors shifted uncomfortably, aware they were sitting too close to a crumbling empire. The silence did not forgive him. It waited, cold, patient, precise. Amara said nothing. She didn't need to. Her quiet composure spoke louder than his speeches about merit and success. Every inch of her restraint, every breath of calm was its own form of truth. He looked around helplessly, his face pale under the chandelier light. You're very educated, he said finally, as if the sentence could erase the scene. I didn't mean to. She met his eyes, still wordless. For the first time that evening, he saw her not as an employee, but as a mirror. In it, his reflection was smaller, thinner, stripped of wealth and title. Behind him, the restaurant manager stood still, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. The other waiters watched from the corner, not cheering, not whispering, only witnessing. Their eyes said what their mouths could not. Let him feel it. The camera flash came again. A short video clip, 10 seconds, maybe less, would later spread far beyond this room. But in this moment, it was not technology that punished him. It was silence. The silence showed him the cost of every careless word, every moment of unchecked power. It exposed the hollowness of his pride, the fragility beneath his wealth. He set the badge down slowly, as though it burned his hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered, barely audible. It wasn't enough. Apologies spoken in comfort never are. The tension broke only when Amara reached forward, calm, professional, and lifted the signed receipt from the table. Her movements were the same as they had been all night, graceful, precise, untrembling. She turned to leave, but paused. The entire restaurant seemed to lean closer. Then softly, so soft that her words carried through the room like a verdict, she said, "Dinner's on the house." No anger. No sarcasm. Only grace. The kind that makes arrogance look small. She walked away, her back straight, her steps unhurried. Behind her, the once powerful man sat in the wreckage of his own pride. No one dared to speak. The cameras caught his face one last time. Not that of a conqueror, but a man unmasked by humility. And in the space she left behind, the silence grew again, vast, unbroken, and righteous. The morning light cut across the office like truth through silence. It touched the edge of a crystal glass on Raymond Cross's desk. New, unblemished, perfect. Yet every time he looked at it, he saw the other one. Shattered, scattered, impossible to forget. He had not slept. His phone had buzzed through the night, each alert a reminder of the video spreading online. 10 seconds of silence had undone 20 years of power. The board wanted statements. PR wanted control. But he wanted quiet. Something the world rarely offered men like him. When the mail arrived, a single envelope lay on top. White, hand-addressed, with his name written in calm, deliberate letters. Raymond Cross. No logo, no return address. The handwriting was neat, graceful. The kind that belonged to someone who still believed words could heal. He opened it carefully, almost afraid of what waited inside. The letter began without anger or accusation. "Dear Mr. Cross, I wanted to thank you," he frowned, reading further. "Not for what happened, but for what it revealed. To both of us. You reminded me why I studied human dignity. Why I believed people could change when they were made to see themselves clearly. You gave me a case study I'll never forget." His eyes stopped for a moment at the next line. Dr. King once said, "Power without love is reckless, and love without power is sentimental." Yesterday, you showed me how dangerous power can become when it forgets its purpose, to serve. Not to silence. The ink was dark and steady. The strokes confident, every letter balanced. Her writing had rhythm, not vengeful, not cruel. Just certain. I don't hold resentment. I hold hope that you'll remember what happened not as humiliation, but as a mirror. Sometimes we meet people not to teach them, but to remind them of what they already knew. He folded the page halfway, then stopped. His thumb brushed the ink, feeling its faint texture, as if the words themselves had weight. It struck him how something so small could feel so permanent. Ink stains paper. Truth stains memory. The letter continued. "You once said success is earned through ability. I agree. But ability means nothing without humanity. I wish you the strength to use your influence with grace, not pride. Sincerely, Amara Lewis." Her name hit him harder than any headline. He set the letter down, staring at the signature, confident, flowing, final. It wasn't just her handwriting he saw. It was her calm voice, her steady eyes, the moment she placed the badge on the table and changed the air in the room. Outside the window, the city moved as if nothing had happened. Cars in motion, people in suits, schedules marching on. Yet inside the glass tower, something had cracked. The kind of break no PR team could fix. He leaned back in his chair, the morning sun painting long lines across the carpet. The letter lay open on the desk, a page of quiet judgment written in ink that refused to fade. He reached for his coffee and paused. The crystal glass beside it gleamed under the light, flawless and whole. Someone from housekeeping had replaced the broken one without being asked. He stared at it for a long time. It was clear, clean, perfect, but no longer innocent. For a man who built his life on numbers and noise, the silence that followed felt heavier than words. Raymond Cross folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope and placed it beside the glass. His reflection shimmered faintly in both. Two versions of the same man, one still powerful, the other finally aware. He exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the unbroken glass, clear, whole but never the same. Weeks passed, and the story that began in a restaurant faded from headlines but not from memory. The video had circled the world, replayed, discussed, dissected, yet what it left behind could not be measured in views. It lived quietly in the conscience of one man. Raymond Cross did not give another interview. He withdrew from the stage he once dominated, speaking less, listening more. In silence, he learned what his empire had never taught him, that power without reflection is just noise. Then, one crisp autumn morning, Harvard's annual report arrived. Its pages were filled with familiar names and grand donations, but one entry near the middle stood apart, the Amara Lewis Fund for Working Scholars. The description was brief, almost modest, for students balancing labor and learning, in honor of resilience beyond circumstance. The donor's name was missing. Just 2 words stood in its place: anonymous benefactor. But those who knew him didn't need to ask. The handwriting on the donation form, neat, precise, deliberate, was the same as the signature once written across a restaurant receipt. Across the campus that day, students paused at the name, unaware of the story behind it. They saw only hope where once there had been humiliation. In his office, Raymond sat by the window, watching the city stretch into the horizon. On his desk, the glass still stood, clear, whole, and quietly changed. He looked at it, then at the framed letter resting beside it, edges worn, words eternal. He whispered the line he had once dismissed, now finally understood. Some wounds don't scar. They teach.